At our ceremonies in June, um, what are together termed Shinsan Kesse, the the two central ceremonies will be Shinsan Shiki, which is the ascending the seat ceremony for the abbot, and then the Hossen Shiki, which we refer to as a Dharma combat ceremony. In the Dharma combat ceremony, one monk, a novice, is is kind of lifted up as a senior novice, a senior monk in training. And in this case, for us, it will be a monk named Jike Kido. And the way that the ceremony works is that a bunch of monks are present. And after the Shuso, who is the head monk, this Jike, comes forward and kind of greets everyone, bowing in all the directions. Then Jike goes to the abbot and receives a staff called a shippe. And this staff, this piece of wood, is understood as a teaching implement. They've never held such a thing, right? And in the context of this ceremony, we're saying you're not ready to hold this all the time, but you're ready to start. There's a lot of formal language in the traditional ceremony where the Shuso says, I am not ready to do this. And then people say, no, 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 you can do it. And they say, no, I'm not ready. They say, no, you can do it. You've got this. And then they take up the staff and they go back to their position. And then they present a case. They present a koan. In a very energetic way. They kind of shout it to the assembly. And it's a way of saying, test me on this. This is where I'm going to begin this part of my training. And people shout questions. It happens very fast. And the Shuso responds in whatever way is authentic in that moment. And at the end, after maybe 10 or 12 of these questions have gone back and forth, it all ends in this very soft way. And then the Shuso stands up and goes back to the abbot and gives back the shippe to be picked up another day. For our ceremonies, I asked our Shiso, Jike, what case they would like to present rather than just hand one over. And the one that they asked for is called Zhaozhou's cypress tree, or the cypress tree in the garden. We're going to become familiar with this over the next few months because we're going to need to be ready. Here it is. A monastic asked Zhaozhou, what is the meaning of the ancestors coming from India? Zhaozhou said, the cypress tree in the garden. The monastic said, Master, please don't teach using an object. Zhaozhou said, I'm not showing an object to you. The monastic said, what is the meaning of the ancestors coming from India? Zhaozhou said, the cypress tree in the garden. There's not much to it. And yet, incalculable texts have been written about this. So many talks have been given on this. Well, let's go through it. Again, we know this formula. The monastic goes to Zhaozhou. Zhaozhou, in Japanese, we call Zhaozhou Joshu. We know Zhaozhou, we've talked about Zhaozhou, because of this famous story in which his teacher cuts a cat in half. And then a couple days later, because Zhaozhou wasn't there, Zhaozhou shows up and his teacher explains the whole thing. And he says, and then I cut the cat in half. He says, what would you have done? And Zhaozhou puts a slipper on top of his head and he walks out the door silently. So we know from that story, we know from this story, Zhaozhou is not, he's not offering a really discursive kind of teaching. He's pointing in a different way. This monastic who goes to him specifically should have expected, and maybe did expect, to be frustrated. So the monastic goes to Zhaozhou and he says, what is the meaning of the ancestors coming from India? The ancestor is Bodhidharma. Say, why did Bodhidharma come here? Why did he come to China? This question comes up over and over and over again. It is not different from the question that drove Dogen. Dogen's question was, if we are all fundamentally already enlightened, why do we practice? What's the point? Here the question is, if the Dharma is complete, if there is nothing undone, if there is nothing lacking, why did this guy come all the way from China? Why didn't he stay where he was? What does it matter? And Zhaozhou said, the cypress tree in the garden. And the monastic, who probably was expecting to be frustrated and probably did know how Zhaozhou teaches, said, no, 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 no. Please, don't teach using an object. Don't mess with me. I want to know. And Zhaozhou says, I am not showing an object to you. I'm not messing with you. The monastic says, okay, okay. So, what is the meaning of the ancestors coming from India? And Zhaozhou says, the cypress tree in the garden. He doubles down. Before we talk about how we might understand this exchange, we have to start from recognizing that this question the monastic is asking, matters. This question is a question that all of you have asked yourself. Not in this way. Maybe not with this language. But if you have ever sat in Zazen and thought to yourself, why am I doing this? What's the point? Then you've asked this question. This question is not an abstract philosophical question. It's a personal question. When the monastic asks, why did Bodhidharma come from India? In a way, he's saying, please make sense of what I've chosen. I shaved my head. I gave up my family. I put on robes. I came to a monastery. And I'm chanting and I'm studying and I'm meditating. And I don't know why. Or at least I can't explain it. What am I doing here? What are you doing here? This question is not a distraction. This question is real. And he distances himself a little bit by putting it in terms of Bodhidharma. But it's not about Bodhidharma. It never was about Bodhidharma. I think there are three basic ways to approach what happens here, what happens next. When Zhaozhou says, the cypress tree in the garden. One way to understand it is that he's pointing to something, Zhaozhou is pointing to something that doesn't come with a why. You don't look at the tree and ask why. You don't look at the tree and ask, what is the meaning of this tree? What is this doing here? That isn't where our minds go. We understand a tree as being fine. We understand a tree as being, in a way, without a story. Not a story that's interesting, not a story that has some hidden depth to it. A tree is a tree is a tree. And so one way for us to understand this response is to say, don't ask why. Why is not what's going on here. Another way to think about this is that he doesn't say that tree right there. He refers to something that they both know, but they aren't looking at. Right? When I say the cypress tree in the garden, we're at the same monastery. You know which tree I mean. You see it, I see it every day. Another way to understand this response is a way of saying, you already know this. You know the answer. Maybe you haven't recognized the answer as the answer before. Maybe you haven't given that part of this much thought because you just walk by it all the time. Maybe it doesn't look important, but it's always right there in front of you. Always. It's the one I know and it's the one you know. So you're asking this question as if it's a pressing question, as if I'm going to reveal something for you. But you've actually been looking at it all the time. And it's not such a big deal. The cypress tree in the garden. Why did Bodhidharma come from India? The cypress tree in the garden. He asks a question that's about why. He asks a question about meaning. And he's given a response that has no particular meaning. He's given a response that is so mundane as to be troubling. Which brings us to the third way. Because the monastic, when he first gets this response, he says, don't teach me using an object. And he says, I'm not. What's so great about the example of a tree, and it doesn't have to be a tree, but what's so great about the tree is that when we look at trees, for the most part, we don't understand them as objects and ourselves subjects. We don't think of ourselves as being in relationship in that way. I'm not doing something to the tree. The tree's not doing something to me. It's not reversed. We understand trees to be kind of independent. They're fine. They don't need us. When we look for the meaning of a story, we just add another story. There's this incredible story here of Bodhidharma at some moment, very late in his life, choosing to leave India, risk his life, go to China where he doesn't know anyone or anything. And then instead of taking some teaching seat and expounding the Dharma and being this ambassador of Buddhism, he goes and he sits in a cave for years by himself. Of course, we want to know the meaning of that. So we ask the meaning because the original story isn't very satisfying. And if we can find some meaning to it, that we can overlay our story on top of that story and make that story manageable. Make that story a story that works for us, that does something for us, that motivates us or clarifies something for us. This monk, again, he's asking so sincerely, explain Bodhidharma's mind. Because if you can explain that to me, maybe I will understand my own. And maybe I will understand yours. And this dis-ease that I feel about this practice, about this life that I chose, will be less. I'll be able to overlay a story of meaning onto this story. Because whatever story of meaning that got me here, it doesn't feel satisfying anymore. I felt I bumped into this all the time when I was in Japan and I was in a monastery, that people would come in with all sorts of intentions, maybe grand spiritual intentions. They wanted to be enlightened. They wanted to be a particular kind of person. And other people would come in with very mundane intentions because they were supposed to inherit a temple and they were told, you have to go. And they say, well, I'm just going to go and do my time. And that kind of clarity can hold up for a week or 2 weeks or a month. And someone can come and say, why are you here? And you say, oh, I know exactly why I'm here. I'm here because of this. I came for this purpose. But after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, it doesn't feel right. Because the person who came for enlightenment isn't finding it. And the person who came just to serve time is doing more than serving time. They're discovering that there's more to it than that. That maybe this is compelling, but then why? Every one of those people in some way ends up asking this same question that the monk is asking. What is the meaning of me being here at all? What is the meaning of what we are doing? What's the purpose of my life? I thought I knew, but now I don't. In some ways, by choosing this case for the Dharma combat ceremony, GK chose something really difficult because even more than other cases, even more than other koans, this one leaves you with no solid place to stand. And yet in the ceremony, you have to be so solid. You have to be so assertive. But in another way, it's such a brilliant choice. It's such a personal choice. Because again, whether we think we know the answer or not, everyone knows the question deeply. And it's not that we shouldn't ask. We just shouldn't expect a satisfying answer. And that's where I'll stop with this for today.